individual level. And it's not as simple as just taking a vote, right? It's not as simple as a majority rules type of approach. It's really about coming to a consensus and an overall embrace understanding of what that social contract is between us as different members of society, right? So as you all as classmates, with your faculty and staff at your universities, in the organizations that you go into, how are we supposed to respect and interact with one another in accordance to in an ethical manner? So it's really about trying to come to that consensus, and we'll work through kind of how we start to get there. A lot of times people think of law enforcement and the legal system as being, the ethical framework and the thing that makes society works, and that ethics is just kind of this extra, cherry on the top that if we get it, great, and if we don't, we'll be fine. But that's not really how it works. Really, law enforcement, it's impossible without ethics. And you have to think about it when we're talking about laws and we're talking about rules. Really, compliance is mainly voluntary, right? We all have to be on board with this. We all have to agree to adhere to these laws and these rules. So if tomorrow all of us decided that traffic lights no longer mean anything, all right, they have no meaning, so we're going to drive however we want to, there's only so much that officers and traffic enforcers could do, right? If we all decide we're not playing by these rules anymore, they can't force us to do so, right? They can't get us into that system there. So really what law enforcement is designed to do is just to correct those that aren't agreeing to and not adhering to the agreed upon rules, all right, that society has said this is how we're going to interact, or these are the things that we're going to abide to. So that's really the placement of law enforcement, is kind of get with the outliers as opposed to making society ethical. We have to come to that consensus and agreement as a whole. All right, now I want to dive into just a few myths when it comes to ethics. Again, kind of setting some of the groundwork here. And one of the, I guess, critiques of ethics or critiques of why we study ethics is some people think, look, we learn this as kids, not adults. You're either an ethical person or you're not. But that's not really true. Your ethical maturity grows with your cognitive maturity. So the more you grow and the more knowledge that you understand and obtain, the more your ethical framework builds out. And we'll look at an example here in just a minute. But making ethical decision, it requires brain power, right? It requires knowledge. It requires maturity. And these are things that we're just not born with having, right? They're things that we have to intentionally work on and grow in. And if you are really focused on, I know a lot of you all, you have aspirations of being successful leaders in whatever arena that you want to enter into. But people who are successful leaders, they have this more advanced ethical reasoning skills. This is something that they have put intention to and put time and effort into. And so just to show you kind of a pyramid here, just to help you better understand, don't feel like you have to memorize any of these, kind of phases or pyramid here, but just for an illustration. So for example, I have a 5-year-old son. I have no illusion that he has is some ethical, moral compass that drives his decision making, right? In those early stages of life, really we make our decisions based off of avoiding punishment. So whatever, punishments you had as a child that you wanted to avoid, and what's going to be in your own self-interest. So if he wants to get candy, or if he doesn't want his screen time taken away, he knows to adhere to certain rules. It's not because he inherently believes that they're right or wrong necessarily at this point, but it's based off of avoiding punishment and what's in my own best self-interest, right? So then as we get a little bit older, we start to care about what our parents or what authority figures think about us. We want that approval. So that good boy, good girl attitude starts driving our behavior some. We also start to understand kind of this law and order, rules that you adhere to, and kind of good and bad, that type of binary thing there. That's what we think about when we're in that younger age group. And then when we get to adulthood, that's when we start thinking about, okay, what is my member as a role of society? What should I be doing, right? What is kind of my responsibility as a member of society, how I should treat others and how I expect others to treat me. And then, you build off of that in terms of setting your own kind of moral principles and integrity, things that you hold yourself accountable to. You don't necessarily expect everyone to hold themselves to those same set of rules, but what's really important to me? What's my ethical code? And those are things, again, no small child is born with these things. These are things that we develop over time. Okay, another myth is that, again, that these classes and these trainings are pointless. It doesn't change behavior. Basically, only incentives are going to change behavior. Only this kind of carrots and sticks mentality. But really, we've learned that that's not true either. The science has shown that, if that's the mentality you come with, then it's kind of, basically universities should pack up and take it home, right? That learning and education is no longer as valuable. But when we're talking about from an ethical framework, expanding our worldview and kind of understanding how our behaviors impact others and what those ripple effects may be. Those may be things that we didn't realize prior to entering some type of formal training, or, a book club or a discussion group, or, a student center for public trust club, whatever it is, until we're kind of made aware. Some of those things we don't know. So it's kind of those, once you know better, then you do better type of approaches. Okay. Then the next myth is we all know what's right. It's just a matter of doing it. I wish it was that simple, right? If that was the case, then why would we disagree all the time, right? You've got this illustration down here of just seeing the exact same thing, but seeing it totally differently. We see that happening all the time in the news. We see that all the time happening in our own lives with family and friends. And so clearly there's something going on there. We don't see things all the same way. It's not a black and white issue. But then on the flip side of that, some people say, well, then ethics are just a matter of opinion. So what's the point in studying them? There are no objective standards. It's all just personal. But there are some levels of agreement that exist, right? If you or a family member were to be, mugged, had your wallet and purse stolen from you, I think we can all agree that the perpetrator's actions were immoral, right? There are certain levels of agreement, certain things that we can take a consensus on that are either acceptable or unacceptable. All right. Okay. So we're getting ready to move into a little bit of a discussion here in just a moment. But one of the key aspects of ethics, what builds our ethics, are our values, okay? And our values, those are our fundamental beliefs that really guide our actions and our behaviors and motivate us. What drives us towards what we think is good or valuable or worthwhile or desirable. Most of those things that drive our actions and motivate us are driven by our values, okay? So I want us to think about our values, okay? And if you guys want to, you can raise your hand and answer, or you can put into the chat box. I know a lot of folks typically a lot of times feel more comfortable putting things into the chat box. But when I say values, and we've got kind of our Wordle over here. Where do those things come from? How are our values developed? Where do those things, where do they originate from? Where do you guys think? How did you develop the set of values that you had? What influenced those, or what inspired those? Let's see, let me pull up the chat here on the side. Okay, I see. Yep, parents, your culture, family and community, family, religion. Yes, absolutely. Your upbringing, your work environment, nurture, family and community. Yes, yes, all of these things, right? And all of these things are different for all of us, right? So it shouldn't be a surprise when we start having some different value systems, because we all had different parents, right? We all had different family upbringings or different family dynamics. You guys are tuning in from all different parts of the country. So what region that you're in, what, country or region that you grew up in, all of those things are extremely influential on how your values were developed. Okay, those are where those things originate from. Very good. Perfect. All right. So the next question I have then, what are some examples of what you would say your core values are? What are some things that you would say are some of your core values? And don't feel like you have to be, fully vulnerable here, but what are some of your, things that you feel? Honesty. Yes. Perfect. That's one. Telling the truth. Yes. Integrity. Word, kindness, hard work, trust. Yes. All of these things. Work ethic. Very good. Yeah. So all of these things are things that we define ourselves by, right? Kindness. These are the things that you guys are talking about. Justice. Those drive your actions, right? Those are going to motivate what you do and what you care about, and the behaviors that you're going to do, the standards that you're going to hold yourself to, because this is one of the things that you use to define yourselves are your core values. You hold those things very dear, especially because they have been kind of lifelong in terms of building and developing those things. Yes, wonderful. Okay, so all of these, all the things that you guys have mentioned are all values that we would hold in high regards. But what I want to kind of go into now, and then I'm going to actually send you guys into breakout rooms shortly after we have this discussion for you to have some smaller group discussions. But what happens when some of these values that we hold near and dear clash with each other? Okay. So truth and loyalty, those were ones that you guys mentioned verbatim. All right. Both wonderful values to hold and maintain. But let's say that I'm your professor in your ethics class, and I have discovered that someone is cheating in class. Okay. I'm trying to get to the bottom of it. I'm trying to get to the root of it. I want to find out who's cheating and hold them accountable. Well, let's say the person who's cheating is your best friend. Okay. So one thing, you hold yourself to being a truthful, honest person. So are you going to tell me the truth about who's cheating in the class? Or are you going to be loyal to that best friend and not say anything to me? Right? So you're caught in a compromising position here. You have two core values that in this scenario are at odds with each other. Okay. So you end up having to fall to one side or the other in terms of what's going to guide your behavior there. You have issues of, say, and I'm going to keep running with this student cheating example, especially because, we're talking about it from an academic integrity, and then we'll build out to kind of how those things influence from a larger standpoint. Okay. So now let's flip it to say you're the student who's cheating in the class. All right. Individual versus community. So by me cheating, I'm prioritizing my individual interests and potentially compromising the community or the classroom's interests, because if my professor gets really frustrated and aggravated that the fact that this cheating is going on and can't seem to stop it, well, naturally, there's going to be some consequences that are doled out to the entire class, right? That may make the class less enjoyable, may cut down on some freedoms. And so you've got those things that seem to be at odds with one another. Short-term and long-term. We see this a lot. You hear this a lot in terms of business discussions, but again, we're going to keep with our classroom example. So say I'm the student that's cheating, and in the short-term interest, I want to get a good grade in this class. I need an A to maintain the GPA that I'm trying to get. And so by cheating, I'm able to, in the short term, get that get that A, right? I'm able to get that goal that I'm seeking. But from a long-term perspective, especially if I'm cheating in an ethics course, we'll say that I probably didn't pick up the ethical decision-making skills that I should have that would allow me to be successful in the future. That's going to allow me to do the things, to make the decisions that I need to make in a way that I need to make them, because I shortchanged myself early on by making those previous decisions. And then that last one of justice versus mercy. So I'll take my position back of being the professor again and say I find out that you're the student who has cheated. How I handle the situation, do I show justice in terms of, whatever I've outlined in my syllabus in terms of holding students accountable for cheating, and whether that's 0 for an assignment or for the course, or removed from the course, or whatever the case may be, right? Do I hold that to the letter of the law? Or if the student comes to me with some extenuating circumstance and they've had all these things going on, these things at home, and they were taking 18, 21 hours and they felt all this pressure to do all this stuff, then do I fall more on the side of mercy and give them some form of leniency there, or give them more forgiveness or grace than maybe I would have otherwise, right? You've got decisions that you have to make in all of those situations. All of those values are admirable to have, but again, sometimes they can be in conflict with one another. So it's being aware of those things. So what I'm going to do now is, I believe I have the power to send you guys into some breakout rooms. And what I want you to do in your breakout rooms, let me find that.
You want me to do it, Dr. Yates?
Yes, if you don't mind, Ashley. And I don't know how many, if we could have maybe 4 or 5 students per breakout room. I don't know what the total number was. And if you guys can just brainstorm some ideas, see if you can come up with different other scenarios that fall under these truth versus loyalty, or individual versus community, short-term versus long-term, justice versus mercy, any of those. And then when we come back, I want to hear what some of the examples were that you guys came up with. Okay.
All right, guys, here you go.
So Mariah, she invited me to a room, but I'll hang out here with you.
That's what I think it invited me as well. So I just hit not now. So hopefully we'll get some of the students to the rest of the students to pop over into their breakout room so they can discuss.
Yeah.
And I'm a professor as well, so I'm going to stay with you.
Okay, no problem. You guys can hang out here with me.
They get me enough, so.
I understand. Yes, yes. My students are the same way. They're like, oh, we get enough of her during the week.
Hi, Dr. McKinney. My name is Alfonso Alexander. How are you today?
Well, hello, Alfonso. If you recall, we've talked about the West Virginia Student Accounting Conference in the past.
I do recall, and I recognize your voice. How are you?
I am doing very well. I'm sorry, I'm not where I can share video today, but I talked with Ashley just last week again about the wonderful program, and I certainly appreciate that that we're able. I have 15 of my students that are part of this today, and we're kind of doing that instead of our own in-state kind of conference that we have been hosting. But I tell you, COVID has set all of us a little bit apart.
Oh, it has. It definitely has.
Yes. Well, thank you all so much for all this good work. And again, including making it possible for us, even though we don't have a chapter, to be part of all of this week.
Well, glad you could be here, and good to get your voice back in my memory. So
Absolutely, sir.
yes. Dr. Yates, thank you so much for joining us and presenting for us today. We're excited and glad to be here. I had some technical challenges trying to get logged in. So
That's okay. That's just the world we're living in. I really appreciate you having me. I'm excited to be a part of this. So I'm looking forward to, you know, I don't know if the students will chat or if maybe we'll get them to talk after having some breakout rooms. So maybe we can get them talking there. So,
you know,
yeah,
when we've done these in the past, I found that they have been quicker to speak up actually and engage, I guess, because, you know, they're not surrounded by their peers physically.
yeah.
They've done well at engaging.
Good. That's wonderful.
Yeah.
It's always, and I found that some too. That's what I've got, because I'm teaching face to face, but we're doing hybrid classes. So my classes are split. You know, I see half of them one day of the week and half of them the other. But then there's some discussion days that we'll do all via Zoom, so we can have everybody together and we can have some more in-depth discussions. And they do a good job of it. And like you said, it seems like they feel a little bit more comfortable, not necessarily in the classroom, whenever they're able to talk that way. So I think that'll be good.
And I concur with that too. I'm doing using Microsoft Teams for my classes, and you know, when they're speaking, I'm asking them to, you know, make sure they're doing their video and sharing. And our advantage is that the students have been in most of their classes together. But no, we're meeting every week strictly on via Teams, and it is. I think it's been one of the best classes, and mine is an accounting ethics course for my seniors as well. So I'm glad that yours is working that way as well.
Yeah. Cedric or Alfonso, would you all have a way to text Ashley and let them know to maybe bring the students back in, see if they're
literally doing that as we
perfect. Great minds think alike there. Yeah, we've given them about 5 minutes or so I think that should be enough time for them to.
And I know she was going to make me a co-host, but I don't know that I'm a co-host officially. So,
well, I can. It's letting me.
Yes.
Okay.
So she's bringing them back.
Okay, wonderful. I was gonna say it gives me the option to join a breakout room, but it's not giving me the option to like pull them back in.
Right. Well, I logged in as Alfonso, so that's why I dropped off right when she asked me how to do the breakout sessions. And I was afraid I was going to mess that all up. So
no, it all has worked smoothly so far. I feel like
so far so good.
Yeah.
Hold on, you're muted, Ash. There you go.
Hey guys.
All right.
One's coming back. Here we go.
Yeah, see the participant numbers rolling in now.
That's right.
It's coming back.
Gives them 40 seconds. They've got a 40-second window.
Mm-hmm.
My team, I was in group 1. I see all of my teammates in the session. 28 seconds. Here we go. $15 seconds. All right.
Okay. All right. Well, it looks like most everybody has returned. So thank you guys. I hope your breakout discussions went well. And so I'm just going to go through the list real quickly here, and we'll just go through maybe 1 or 2 examples for each, and then we'll move along. But I wanted to hear, what did you guys, what if a group, and if you will, instead of the chat, if you don't mind actually sharing aloud with us, what was a truth versus loyalty example that one of the groups came up with?
I'll go. I was in group 6, And what we came up with is if your friend stole something and then a cop got both of y'all pulled over and say, are you going to be loyal to your friend or are you going to tell the truth to the cop on what situation happened?
Yeah, absolutely. And so what was there a consensus taken, or were you just
some people said it depends on if it was like a candy bar or if it was an electronic item that was expensive on what they would do. And then somebody said that they wouldn't say anything because the cop wants you to say something. So
okay, all right. So exactly right. And unfortunately, in that scenario, you've got, a friend that has put you in a bad position, right? That has created an ethical dilemma for you that you didn't sign up for. And so that could be something, again, you may have to depend on the context there, but that would be something then worth addressing with your friend after the fact, whichever way it went after the interaction with the police officer. And just discussing, that's not something that you want to be put in that position moving forward, right? That really you felt compromised in that position either way, and that's not something that you would feel comfortable with moving forward. Okay, what about individual versus community? Did somebody have an individual versus community one that they would be willing to share?
We talked about overextension.
Okay.
So if you're asked to do something that compromises your own responsibilities, but it's for the better community, that might be an issue.
Yeah, that's a great example, right? And that is something that so many of us, that balance that we all try to find, right? That wanting to give back or wanting to contribute to our community in whatever aspect that may be, whether it's your student organizations or whether it's a community effort or whether it's family, but then also that kind of balance of, your own kind of self-care, right? Making sure that you've got time to do the things that you need to do, taking care of your own mental health, being mindful of your own stress levels. I think that's something that, especially during the pandemic, we have seen some dynamics that have come around about that. Perfect. Thank you for sharing. All right. Short-term versus long-term. Who's got an example there?
So our group talked about, so take, for example, you have this could fit a couple of these, but you have a supervisor who tells you to lie on a document and you're told to put that through. Lying on it, you could lose your job. That's short term, that sucks. You lose your job. But long term, the consequences of you lying could hurt loads of people. And so you have to weigh, is your short term, yeah, there might be some complications for following the truth, but long term, not following the truth will hurt more people on the line.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And you see that even when there's not pressures maybe directly from a supervisor, but a lot of folks, especially as they're going out onto the job market, have that kind of internal battle of, being as transparent as possible and making their resume look as good as possible. But also making sure that they're not crossing a line, right? That they're not claiming a skill that they have that they really don't. And getting you into a position where, yes, you may be hired for a job, but long term you're not really qualified for that position. So yeah, that's something that a lot of people wrestle with. Absolutely. Perfect. Thank you. All right. And the last one, justice versus mercy. Did someone have an example of that they would be willing to share?
I had one for that. It was for justice and mercy. My group came up with a decision. It was, if you get into your job and say you're applying for the job, on your resume, if you put in that you went to school for this many years, but say you didn't graduate and you still get the job, you can go for a couple months and then your supervisor figures out that you didn't have the credentials. So you can you're faced with the dilemma of either firing them because it wasn't justified of them having the credentials to do the job, or you could also work to push and help them get the job. And that would be like showing mercy to them and helping them get those credentials so they can get that criteria for working in the job.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great example. Thank you. Thank you, Carter. Yeah. And again, once you guys are in those positions of leadership and supervisors or managers, you may be faced with some of these things, right? You may be faced with people who don't feel well equipped. And so maybe they oversell or, they say that they are qualified or have credentials that maybe they don't, but maybe it's due to a perception that they didn't feel that they were going to get it in the first place. So once you are informed of that information, how you respond to that, can be critical in terms of for that individual as well as yourself and your leadership moving forward. So figuring out what's going to be the most appropriate context. And here in just a minute, we'll actually talk about how do we deal with some of these ethical dilemmas and what are some of the things we can ask ourselves in terms of how to deal with that. So we'll move on to the next slide now. Thank you guys so much for your participation there. Okay, this is just talking about, we talked about kind of individual level, but we have differing values that occur in organizations as well. Sometimes this can occur, especially if you're having trouble with maintaining an ethical environment or an ethical environment in terms of the workplace. One of the issues could be is that the organization's culture is clashing with that of the compliance office or the ethics, the ethics officers. It depends on, the size of the organization and things, what that looks like or entails. But, there's going to be rules, there's going to be regulations, there's going to be compliance that different organizations have to adhere to. But you have to have a culture that's supportive of that, right? That says, this is what we're going to hold our standards to. Because we'll talk about some of the ways that people may end up feeling compromised or kind of falling into some traps there when it comes to not maintaining that integrity that they say they want to hold themselves to. So you have to have a culture that's supportive of that, that not just says that these are values that we have, but also backs those up with actions, right? So if somebody breaks with that, then there are consequences, or that there aren't special exceptions given to those that are star performers, rules for some and not for others, right? So you have to maintain integrity there. You also have, of course, you can have employees that have differing values from that of the organization. And so most of the time, those things can be rooted out either through the hiring process or throughout performance appraisals and different processes there. Again, as long as you've got a strong ethical culture that you're adhering to, any individuals, typically you can kind of work through either correcting some of those issues, or if it is an instance where someone needs to be let go, then you know when it's the appropriate time to do so. All right. So now I'm going to move on to talking about some of the common causes for unethical behavior, because I think sometimes, again, we kind of get in this binary mindset of you've got good people and bad people, and good people are ethical and bad people aren't, and only bad people do unethical things. But that's not always the case, okay? So we're gonna talk about some of the 5 most common reasons that these things happen in trying to work through those things. Okay, so the first one is poorly conceived goals. So this is where overly ambitious goals are set. So sometimes they're really impossible or infeasible. And so people feel pressure that they have to cut corners or they have to do things that otherwise they wouldn't in order to achieve these ambitious goals, right? So if your job is on the line and your boss has set into place these really high goals, you're going to be motivated to do things that otherwise you may not have otherwise have done. So from an academic example, so either setting up overly ambitious goals yourself that you may be setting yourself up for failure, or sometimes we have, I'm not saying us as instructors and professors are always perfect, right? Sometimes we get a little overly ambitious in terms of what we're asking of our students, and we have to be mindful of, are we setting them up for failure, or are we setting them up to cut corners or take shortcuts that we wouldn't want them to do? In terms of corporate examples, the Wells Fargo scandal that happened a number of years ago, where you had these goals for, tellers and frontline workers to sign up so many customers for certain accounts, right? And it apparently was overly ambitious because in mass, you had these tellers and bank workers that were signing customers up for accounts that they didn't sign up for. All right. And it was, again, because there was this pressure to achieve this overly ambitious, unfeasible goal. The other one that happens is, or has happened in the past, is what we call a stack ranking system. We don't see these as much anymore because organizations have kind of figured out that they set up some hyper competition where people are promoted based on subjective measures as opposed to objective measures. So just as long as you're doing better than the guy or girl next to you, you're most likely to receive the promotion. And so that might motivate you to do things to make them not look so good, right? And so we want to be mindful of the environment that we're setting up when we're setting up goals, and that we are strategic and we are thoughtful in terms of what type of behavior that may motivate individuals to do. All right, the next one is motivational blindness. So this is where a conflict of interest exists, but employees are encouraged to ignore it, to look the other way, you know, that kind of hear no evil, see no evil type of thing. So we're not going to say anything about it. You know, from a classroom setting, you know, maybe you've got a student in your group or your team that is cheating, or, you know, they're doing something unethical within the classroom, but they're a key part of your group and your team's overall project. So you don't feel like you can say anything because it may be then harmful to you, right? Maybe harmful to your final grade if you were to say something about it. From a corporate example, you know, I give the Penn State example where you had the football coach who for years was engaging in abuse, and it was widely known, but the institution was receiving a lot of money. You know, you had fundraising, you had a lot of publicity, you had a lot of things that were tied up in the kind of hierarchy or this royalty of football fame and success. And so even though you had a lot of people that knew what was happening, nobody said anything, because if so, that whole kind of house of cards would fall along with it. And people were worried about losing their own jobs, or other higher ups being upset with them because of the potential downfall that would come with that. Okay. All right. The next one is indirect blindness. So this is where sometimes we don't criticize someone's behavior as harshly because they have a third party carry it out for them. And so we see this. I had a video. I don't know, Ashley, are we going till 1 o'clock? Is that right? Okay, but I need 5 to 10 minutes. All right, I may zoom through some of these just so we can get to the end and get to questions. So one of the things is sometimes organizations will have a third party carry out things that are maybe ethically questionable. And so a video that I can have Ashley maybe share after the fact is, so Apple and Samsung and a lot of our electronic companies, they have a third party factory produce their products. So Foxconn is one. And their practices and the treatment of their workers have been questioned for a number of years now in terms of their pay, the living situations that they have, the hours that they keep. But because Apple or Samsung's name is not on the door of that factory, they're not held to that same level of accountability as it would be if their name was on it. Okay. So again, from a personal example, say you didn't steal the answers to the exam, but someone in your class got them and shared them with the rest of the class. You may feel like you aren't as held as accountable because you weren't the one who directly did it. You had kind of a third party that engaged in that unethical behavior there. All right, and the last one here is this slippery slope. So employees or individuals are less likely to notice unethical behavior when it happens gradually and it happens incrementally, as opposed to like you came in on day one and, things were all awry and you didn't feel comfortable working there. But if things happen in small increments, you will adapt to the environment that is around you. So I will show you guys, I will show one video and then we'll kind of move quickly through some of our other things. But let me pull up one video that I did want to share with you here. Okay. Share. Actually, we're gonna. Okay. All right, so just, yeah, it's 2 minutes, so we've got time for this one.
A frog is a cold-blooded animal, and humans are warm-blooded, so our body burns energy or perspires to maintain the same 98.6 degrees. The cold-blooded frog's body temperature goes up and down with the temperature of its surroundings. Although frogs love water, when I hold it over this pot of boiling water, this frog is very uncomfortable and climbs to get away from it. Now, the water in this pot is room temperature, 69.4 degrees, so he's comfortable when I put him in. If I turn the burner on low flame, his body temperature will adjust and slowly he will heat up with the water. The water temperature has risen to 80 degrees and the frog is the same temperature and still comfortable. If I turn up the burner slowly again, he won't notice because he'll continue to change to be the same as his surroundings. When we started, I held the frog over the first pot of boiling water. He was uncomfortable and he tried to get away from the heat. But now, because we're raising the temperature slowly, he doesn't recognize the danger he's in. He just keeps going along with the changes in his surroundings. Eventually, we can turn up the burner to a deadly boil. He will just keep trying to adjust with it. By the time he realizes it's killing him, it's too late. He won't notice in time because he just keeps changing himself to go along with the changes in his surroundings.
Okay, so hopefully I didn't traumatize you all too much with that. So there was, I always like to see my students' faces when they see that. And I've had some that were like, I was going to talk to you after class because I was so upset about this until they saw what it was. So hold on one second here. I'm trying to, let me close out that. Okay, there we go. So hopefully you're not too traumatized, right? That there was a star frog and a stunt frog. Let me pull our slides back up here. And so the relevancy. Okay. So you guys see my screen here. Are we good, Ashley? Okay. So the illustration there, right, is that when unethical behavior is happening slowly around us, we don't notice it. And so we adapt to our environment. And that's that kind of that slippery slope idea. And so before we know it, we're doing things that we never would have done before because we just were adapting to the environment around us. And if we are in an unethical environment, you know, that's kind of that advice that your parents gave you as kids, right? Is kind of being mindful of the company that you keep because you are going to be influenced by those that are around you, by those that are in your environment. And so the same thing happens with ethical situations and environments as well. So again, hopefully not too traumatized, but you'll remember the frog if nothing else. Okay, so the last of this list here is overvaluing performance. So our tendency to the end justifying the means, all right, that are end goals, that we prioritize whatever it is that we're wanting to get, and we don't care what it takes in order to get there. So from an academic perspective, you know, you may have the goal of, I need to get all A's, and I don't really care what it takes to do so. And so you justify or rationalize whatever means or shortcuts you take in order to get there. And we've seen this happen as well within organizations, justifying, you know, insider trading and how it impacts profitability and those types of things. Okay, so And I'll go through each of these real quickly. So what do we do then? If we are faced with, an ethical dilemma that's happening, how do we know what to do or what the best choice is to make? So this ethical decision checklist gives us some questions to ask ourselves. So one, does this option, does the decision I'm considering making, does it do less harm than other options, than other potential avenues? Would I be okay if my decision was made public, right? If it was published in the local paper, do I feel comfortable with that, right? That helps you to kind of get a gauge on what direction your choice is going there. Could I defend it could I defend my decision if I was brought in front of a congressional committee or a committee of my peers? Can I justify my actions and why I chose to do something? Because even ethical actions won't always be popular, right? So you need to be able to, like I said, be able to defend that. Think about that self-application aspect. When I still feel like this was a good choice, if I was the one who was adversely affected, because a lot of times something is an ethical dilemma because there's a cost associated with it. And that cost maybe is a negative impact to someone or someone's else. So how would I feel if I was in that position? What would my colleagues say about this? What do they suggest as a solution? And this is something I advise that you do, especially early on in your career. If you face an ethical dilemma, talk to your coworkers about it. Most likely it's not the first time this has ever happened. So ask them what their thoughts are. How have they handled a similar situation? They can usually provide you with some sound advice and help you to know what is the best approach from your organization's standpoint there. A lot of professions have governing bodies or ethics committees, especially from legal and medical, that guide what they can and cannot do. So what would the ethics committee or governing bodies say about your actions? And then what would the company's ethics officer or legal counsel say? So every company may not have an ethics officer, but especially if it's something high stakes that you feel may have legal liability or implications, you need to talk with your company's legal counsel about what the best approach is. All right, and our last section here is, okay, we've talked about all these challenges, we've talked about all these dilemmas. So how do I move forward as an ethical leader, as a, kind of a role model? What should I do? So you've got these 5 principles of ethical leadership that should help to guide you really through any of these scenarios. So the first one is ensuring that you are respectful of others, being respectful in terms of listening, empathizing, and confirming their value and worth as well. The next is serving others. So an ethical leader is going to prioritize the welfare of other people, right? In terms of being altruistic, mentoring, team building, and empowering those that they are in charge of leading. All right, you do want to ensure to show justice. All right, so it's important that in a leadership position that you are concerned with being fair, giving fair and just treatment, and really adhering to that idea of the golden rule. So treating others as you would want to be treated is always a good guide there. Manifesting honesty. So you want to be open, you want to be transparent, you want to be authentic. Again, you will be charged with making tough decisions sometimes. But most of the time, people just want transparency, right? They want to know why. They want to understand. And even if they don't always agree, if they can understand why and what your justification was and being very transparent about that, most people can get on board with it, even if it isn't necessarily what they wanted. Okay. And that last one is building community. So using that influence that you have, the position of leadership that you have, to help your group, your team, your community, your organization help to achieve shared goals. All right. That's really what you are, your responsibility as a leader in whatever roles that you are taking on. It's your responsibility to use that and to use that position for good, right? And to help generate shared goals and help to generate positive outcomes for everybody. So that is all of my talk. I had a few of just kind of potential questions, but we don't have to go through these. I'm open to questions from the group at this point.
You can feel free to unmute yourself if you have any questions, or type them in the chat box if you're more comfortable with that. If we don't have any, that is a-okay. If you have any additional questions, feel free to email them to me and I'll make sure they get to Dr. Yates. Dr. Yates, this was wonderful. I learned so much. I know that our students did too. I think we're forever going to remember the frog video. So thank you so much for being with us today. I know our students really got a lot out of it. So thank you so much. Oh, we did have one question come in.
Oh, go back to the ethical decisions checklist. Absolutely. Let me pop back over there. And Ashley, that's something too. If you want me, because I actually have this like in a Word document that kind of has an outline of these things that we talked about, including the principles of ethical leadership. I can forward those to you if you want to send those to the students. So you guys have that after the fact. So
perfect.
Yeah.
We can do that.
Yeah. Thank you guys.
Great. Great. Well, thank you guys again so much for joining us. Please join us the rest of this week. We have some really great speakers as well tomorrow. Alfonso Alexander, who is the president of the NASPA Center for the Public Trust, is going to be chatting about the true you. So what that means from an accountability standpoint, responsibility, how you look as a leader, and kind of taking a look at that. And then on Thursday, we have Tracy Odie Blunt. She is with corporate communications with the NFL, and she's going to be discussing diversity and inclusion and how that's related to authentic leadership. So again, thank you all so much for joining us. Please be sure to check your emails tomorrow. We're going to be sending, again, the link for you to join us for tomorrow's presentation. We are also going to be sending a survey. So we would love to get your feedback and see how we can continue to plan great Lead with Integrity conferences like today. So thank you again, guys. Have a great one.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Yates.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.